Good afternoon, everyone. If you don't know, my name is Lisa Poff, and I'm the project director for the Indiana Deafblind Services Project. And I want to welcome all of you to part one of our Literacy for Students with Complex Communication Needs with Nancy Steele. And I will let Nancy tell you all about herself in just a minute, but I wanted to start off with a few logistics. First, we set the Zoom room up so that when you enter the room, all of the microphones and webcams are off. If you could keep yourself muted unless there's a discussion or Nancy asks somebody to say something, that would be very helpful. Throughout the session, please feel free to post any comments or questions that you have in the chat room. I'll be keeping track of that so that we make sure any of your questions are answered. I think by now everybody knows how to get to the chat box, but if you don't, it's on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. We are captioning this session. If you need to turn on captioning, that is also at the bottom, but I think it's popping up for everyone. It looked like it. After the workshop, I'm going to ask you to complete an evaluation, and in order to get your certificate, you must complete the evaluation. I will put the evaluation link in the box, in the chat box at the end of the workshop or closer to the end. I will also be sending it out in a follow-up email. When you do the evaluation, there will be a link on the last page to click so that it takes you to a form to get your certificate. Once you click on that link, it brings it up in a separate window. You must go back to your first window and hit submit on your evaluation form so that I get that. Once you complete that secondary form, you will automatically get a certificate generated and emailed to you. Anybody having any technical difficulties today, I will put my contact info, my phone number in the chat box, and then you can get a hold of me and I'll try to help you. I think that's everything I had to say. So at this point in time, I'm going to turn it over to you, Nancy.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Nancy Steele, and I am a former teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing. I did that for 17 years here in Kentucky. I live in Lexington, Kentucky. And then I went to the National Center and worked for the National Center on Deaf Blindness, I should say, and worked there for almost 15 years and worked in a lot of classrooms, did a lot of stuff. I was the lead on literacy for the center at the time. And then after I left the center, I've been doing a lot with communication and especially around communication matrix for a while. But literacy and communication go hand in hand, as we're about to find out. So these are my true loves. I am a sibling of someone with a disability, so I think, I never came into the field of special ed because of that, but in my later years, in reflecting back, it definitely made a big difference in how I perceived a lot of things. I always looked at things from the child's perspective. And when you start looking from that perspective, it gives you a whole different view. And so with that, I want to get started. It's been a minute since I've done a lot with literacy. So going back and looking and getting ready for this day and for a couple of weeks from now, it really is like just getting back with an old friend. I've really, really enjoyed going back and just really reflecting and looking back at literacy and looking through the literacy lens. I've been looking through the communication lens for pretty hardcore for the last few years, but literacy, I did the same thing before. So it's kind of fun to go back and do that. So with that, let's get this party started. What do you think? When I do this, I want you all to, hopefully, everybody can see that. And in just a second, I will. Oh, I hate that stupid. Now, there we go. Now we can get that party started. All right. So with that, let's just dive in because we've got a lot to cover today. Today, I'm going to talk mostly about just the foundational pieces of what it looks like, what literacy looks like for learners with complex communication needs. You know, we don't often think that it's hard for us to think about this and applying literacy to this population. But it really, once we get into it and think about it, it's just a matter of everything you know, just dialing it a little bit and then coming at it from a little different angle. And then it makes perfect sense. So hopefully we'll make it make sense today. All right. So what is literacy? And this is just a really foundational definition because I think we have to start there. It's the minimal ability to read and write in a designated language, as well as a mindset or a way of thinking about the use of reading and writing in everyday life. Now, that's a pretty minimal, view of literacy, but it's pretty much what we all think about when we think about literacy is reading and writing and just how we use that reading and writing. Okay, but where does that leave our students? When we look at it from that lens, where does it leave our students? Because so many of our students haven't developed communication yet. But, so it's hard for us to really then look at literacy and think all that, and we're supposed to teach them how to read and write too. Okay, so let's reflect just a little bit about our learners. And this is, so much of what we learn is through incidental learning. This is typically developing because I always have to go to typically developing and then take it to our kids. And what does that look like? And of course, I'm looking at it from the lens of a kid with deaf blindness, but also kids with significant disabilities. So either one, it's just in how many supports and how much access we have to give them, okay? So when we look at incidental learning, that's 90% of everything we've learned in life has been learned incidentally. And all of us here are college and beyond, graduate school, everything else. We have lots and lots of education under our belts. But still, 90% of what we learned was incidental. And by incidental, I mean we just watched other people. It just kind of occurs automatically without much effort. You think about when you go in a restaurant, you sweep your eyes and you know whether I'm supposed to wait for the hostess to seat me or I'm supposed to go through with a tray, or if I order at the counter and go sit down. We all know that through a couple of things. Number one, we're watching other people. The other is because we've done these things so many times that we know automatically. So through our experience as well. It's the way most of our information is learned. Think about how many times you look over or your students are looking to see what everybody else is doing, and then they do it. So learning progresses from the known to the unknown, right? Okay, so then we get to secondary, and this is all of our education, all of our formal education, what we do is educating. We're listening to a person teach or present information. So today we're working on that secondary level of how we gain knowledge. And the last one, and you see it's in a triangle, and that very little bit piece is direct or hands-on experience. It gels more for us when we can do it hands-on, but so many times we don't do that way. We learn things by watching others or whatever. Okay, but our sensory challenges can turn learning just upside down, right? It just really makes it like wacko to try to figure out how are we going to do this. So the sensory impact when we're talking about our kids with these complex communication needs, and especially our kids with deaf blindness, it just flips our triangle completely over. And if you think about it, I'm going to start at the bottom there with the incidental piece. that just may not occur at all or is distorted depending on the vision loss. If there is a vision loss, or if it's an acuity loss where it's blurry or whatever, or just depending on the kind of loss that they have. So it may not occur, or they're just getting snippets of things. Even our kids that do have vision, if they have motorically, they're involved, very involved, then they're not going to get but the things that kind of come into their zone where they can see it, so they miss out on so much. And you think about our students also, just how many experiences do they have that are, it's quite different from our typically developing kids. They don't have as many of those things that help us to grow and really learn from this incidental learning piece, right? So secondary learning for these guys is just very, very difficult. It can happen, but it's just so tiny. Most of what they need, most of what our kids need, that for you guys that are on here today, is that direct learning and hands-on experience that are essential and the best way for them to learn. But you think about it and it just makes your head explode to think about how are we going to make this happen? Okay, so now let's talk about, and I'm going to switch the gear a little bit and talk about just barriers to literacy. And a big barrier, one of the biggest, is attitudinal barrier. And that's just our attitude, and not necessarily our attitude, but others' attitudes about, well, I don't see why that's important to these kids. I don't see how they can possibly do these things. So if we have that attitude, then you're right, they're not going to succeed, right? Also, those low expectations. It's sad to see how very low expectations that we have for some kids. We just don't expect them to do anything. And guess what? If we don't expect it, here again, it's not going to happen. Also, those limited opportunities. When you think about how so many things, when a kid is born with disabilities, there are so many other factors that are entering in that parents don't necessarily think about. Wow, I should also be doing literacy. Whereas if you have a typically developing kid, so many times that's just a natural part of what we do as we're raising our kids. And then the limited means to accessing literacy. Sometimes it's that access piece that is huge, because it's like, okay, we can have all these books, but how do we adapt them? How do we make them fit so that our learner can understand, and that we can not go crazy just making all of these things all the time, right? Limited time is also a huge piece. There's so many hours in a day, and so much we can do. And so just that time factor is hard. And then there's the age factor. Oh, well, I have to wait until they do this. I have to wait until they do that. And then, well, hey, he's 15 years old. Why start now? He's going to be out soon. And, I just don't see where that's going to fit. So we have all of those barriers that happen that keep us from helping kids to develop literacy. Okay, so, literacy is truly a quality of life issue. It just helps you think about it. And I have several grandkids, one of which is learning to read now. So this really hits home when I think about, his self-esteem as he's learning to read, and he's getting that passage and just feeling so proud of himself. It's also that self-determination and just that independence. It's like, hey, you read the recipe for me. He and I are going to get together this Friday and make cookies or whatever. So he's going to help me with that recipe. And just learning how to read those things and do those things. He's gathering information, or sometimes it's for organization. You know, we all have our calendars that help keep us organized, but we have to write in there or type in there if we're using one electronically. And that helps us to keep organized, but we have to have the literacy piece in order to do that. Just learning in general really relies heavily on literacy, especially the older we get and the more that we are supposed to learn. And then there's just the entertainment of it. You know, how many of us love to just get a good novel every once in a while and just sit down and just read it, or even have conversations with others about, you know, what we've read or a story that we've heard about or whatever. So these literacy just really affects all of our life issues, you know, the quality of life. So the development of literacy is founded upon our experiences, beginning at birth. So literacy really does begin at birth, if you think about it. And it also is based on our experiences. Once again, I'm going to take you back to our students. What have their experiences been? A lot of times it's very limited, and it's, you know, they're at home a lot. Some parents are good about going out and doing things and keeping them involved with everything else. Others not so much. It just kind of pulls it all in, and their experiences are hospitals, NICUs, you know, or doctor's appointments or different things like that, which are quite different experiences than we typically have. Okay, so with this, I want to show you a little video. This is a very quick little video, and I want to tell you that this is a little baby. What I'd like for you to do is look at this, and she's 10 months old at this point. And I will tell you that from the day that she was born, her dad made sure that he took a book to the hospital and he read to her from the very first day she was born up until all throughout. So let's look at this. When you look at this video, you don't see it, but there are probably 5 or 6 toys just out of the lens of the camera. This happens to be one of my grandkids, and she is 15 now. But at the time, I was working on all of this literacy stuff, and I caught her in the act. And so I probably missed about the first 30 seconds of this. This goes on for like 3 minutes. I'm not going to show you the whole thing, I don't think, but we'll see. Oh, wait a minute. I hit the wrong thing. How am I I can't get my, sorry. I can't get my film to go. Oh, shoot. Guys. Well, we're not going to watch that movie. I guess we'll do it when we're together in Indy in a couple of weeks. How's that? Because
Hey,
I really, yes.
Nancy, do you want to try to get out of your PowerPoint and run it from wherever it is on your desktop?
I could do that. Actually, I could do it this way. Hold on, let me get in there. Because actually what I did was move the thing down when I made it too big so that I couldn't get to the, let's see if that makes it happen. Nope, it's not going to do. Okay, so we're just going to move on. Sorry about that, but we will watch that when we get together, because I really want you to see just how much she sits and flips and turns the pages, does all kinds of things like that. So now I need to share my screen, don't I? Hold on. All right, how do we mess up a very good Zoom call? Huh. All right, I can't find y'all. There you are. All right, now I'm going to share my screen again. Sorry about that. Wow. We're going to mess this all up, aren't we? Okay. So basically what I want to talk about is that she developed so many concepts through that. She was flipping the page. She was looking at stuff. Why is my okay. So she was flipping the switch. She was doing all kinds of things with the book, but in that she was developing concepts. You know, we have to learn how to read hold a book. Sometimes babies will gnaw on books. We lick on books. We do all kinds of things. Every one of us have done that, you know, but that's as much a piece of literacy as reading words on a page. And we have to stop and think about those things happen at such an early age. And we don't consider those with the typically developing kid as much as we should when we're looking at this population. The foundations of those concepts are developed, you know, we have to develop those concepts before we can ever get into reading and writing. Okay, so next. All right. So the pathway to literacy, it just requires establishing communication and connecting meanings to objects and events and people in our world. We have to start there and really getting to that communication and making meaning of life. So, you know, we had folks that have done a whole lot around research around literacy and receptive communication and expressive communication and reading and writing. And there's just the correlation. It all works together. Every single bit of it, reading and writing and speaking and listening, all happen at the same time. And it really develops that way. So many other skills are involved in developing literacy. You know, there's that spatial memory, where things are on a page, or just awareness of your body, how I'm holding that book, how I'm flipping those pages. The use of a body, you have to be able to maneuver your body somewhat. Refined hand grasp as you're trying to grab the page and flip. Matching and sequencing, looking at all kinds of other things, other skills that are involved. Literacy it begins at birth. And it's based on the belief that all children can become or are becoming literate. So we have to think about there is this continuum that happens. And kids develop somewhere, no matter where your learner is, they're on this continuum. No matter what their age, no matter what their disability, whatever, they're all on that continuum somewhere. They may be at the very start, they may be up a notch or two. So we're going to talk about that some. It really includes a very strong emphasis on communication. And we need opportunities for working with words and pictures and symbols, self-selected reading, guided reading, writing. They need a practice with all of that, just like anybody else does. So it really develops in stages. Literacy really develops in stages, and we're going to go through these stages just, you know, and there could be several others, but we're going to just devote our time to these for today. So there's early emergent literacy, then there's emergent literacy, there's developing literacy, and then there's early independent literacy, and then you get to where they're independent. Okay, so with early emergent, it's the interest in books, print, just handling those books. Books have stories. Scribbling is also a piece of this. So all of those things, if you think about very young children and just that, you know, I wish you could have seen Caroline flipping that book and flipping it over. And it was one of the texture books. So she was scratching on it and she'd kind of look around like this, think about as she was scratching it. All of those things helped to develop that interest in books. You know, the reason why she sat there for 3.5 minutes playing with that book like she was is because her dad, from the day she was born through 10 months, every single day she'd been read to. So she knew that books were important in her life. A lot of our kids, they haven't had that. They haven't had that exposure like she had. So it makes a difference that we have to sometimes start here with our kids. We have to think about, wow, if they don't know how to turn a page in a book, or even the mechanics of the front and the back of a book, if it's backwards or upside down, or how it's molded, they don't know. So therefore, it's very foreign to them. And so they have to have that time to experience and just have fun with it. Emergent literacy is where there's text and pictures have meaning, where they're starting to figure out, oh, I'm reading this and I'm getting something out of it. It begins with reading to read some words, and especially if you have those stories that have, you know, the rhyming things or the same kind of sentence over and over and over again. They begin to read some of those words. They may write a few letters at this stage too, just starting, you know, it goes from scribbling to starting to form those letters just a touch. And you think about that's those 3-year-olds, 2-3-year-olds. So then developing literacy is awareness that words are made of different sounds. So that's that phonemic awareness that they're starting to, oh, well, that's M, or ba, 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 those kind of things. Understanding picture books, just looking at the pictures and that there's words on there. They may begin starting to get some sight vocabulary. And they're putting words together to form just simple sentences. So they're starting to, you know, play around with words a little bit and just getting that awareness and really starting to develop a few things. Then we get to early independent literacy. That's where they began to read for interest or information. You know, they've decided, oh, I can do this. I know what I want to read about, whatever. You know, I want to read about soccer, or I want to read about cheerleading, whatever. It doesn't matter, but they're starting to read because it's something they're interested in. Sometimes they'll write their own ideas down. They'll start to write those things and form those opinions, those thoughts, and know that they can put them down on paper. And they may be answering questions about text, you know, where we start reading things to them, and we might say, oh, well, what color is that? What does this look like? Oh, where did she go next? You know, those kind of things. At this age, two of my grandkids in particular discovered their mother's phones, and that they could text me, and I would get these all of a sudden all these emojis, and I'd know, oh, well, there's Hannah, or oh, there's Ben, who's starting to write me stuff. And they're understanding that power of, oh, wow, you know, when I do this, then it's going to somebody and they're going to come back, you know, their grandmother's going to send them back some emojis. And I would start with emojis, and I might write a few words too, along with the heart or whatever. So that's that early independent. Now let's talk about the components of reading. And this is it's really where the foundation is, as we're thinking about, you know, we've talked about the kind of continuum of how they're developing literacy. Now let's talk about some of the components, and they are phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and text comprehension. So it's every one of these need to be a part of learning. When we're talking about our deaf-blind individuals, And even our deaf individuals, we may not necessarily go with phonemic awareness and phonics just because if they can't hear it, we're not necessarily going to spend a whole lot of time in that. So with phonemic awareness, I am going to bring it in just because it is part of the components of reading. So phonemic awareness is the ability to hear, identify, and manipulate individual sounds in spoken words. So that's where they're sounding things out as they're trying to write or that kind of thing. Then phonics is that relationship between written words and spoken words. So they're really hearing the sounds and trying to sound them out. Fluency is that ability to hear, identify, and manipulate individual sounds in spoken words. So really getting, and you think about when you get those early readers who are reading, and it is very painful sometimes to hear them and they're really trying to sound it out. But then as they practice and they get more and more, then they become fluent. So I would say to you guys, that's one of the key things that you need to think about is getting them to that fluent place where they're really understanding and identifying. That's a huge piece of what we have to do is once we get them there, we've got to get them where they're fluent and it comes naturally to them. The next is vocabulary, the words we must know to communicate effectively. And you think about, in typically developing, we have spelling, we have vocabulary all the time, right? With our special needs kids, we have vocabulary and stuff. It's a lot more limited. But we really must have some kind of vocabulary, and we target those vocabulary words that they can learn and then have that fluency piece that comes back in and help them to not only use it when they're doing it with us, but also to use it in other contexts, in other settings with other folks. Then there's oral vocabulary. So those are the words that in speaking or recognizing and listening. Then we have reading vocabulary. So that's just the words that are recognized or used in print. And then the last reason is comprehension. It's the reason for reading that, we're reading to see if they understand, and we're always checking. And the things I would say to you guys is always, no matter what you're teaching them, when you're pulling in that literacy piece, you always want to have the vocabulary. You always want to have comprehension, a way to how can I check for comprehension? And you also want to get them to that fluency piece. Those are three things that you absolutely must when you're marrying those continuum and then putting these pieces in there where you're always thinking about those three things. Okay, so what does this mean for our students with significant disabilities? I mean, we've got to raise the expectations. If we don't raise expectations, then we're not going to get very far. We've got to know that if we expect things, and over my 40 years of working in this field, I have definitely found that if I say, well, what makes you think you can't? And just really raising that bar, kids will come up to that expectation or surpass anything I ever expected of them. But I have always had that expectation there that I expect them to learn. I expect them to get what I'm doing, and I'm raising that bar on them always. We also have to provide that access. And this is the tricky part. This is the part that gets us in trouble because sometimes we don't know how to do that. Especially when we're talking about kids that are deafblind and you're starting to think, well, I can visually, if they don't have it, then I can do it in another mode. But it just all gets very hard to figure out how to give them access to the information that I want them to have. We also have to use a dual instructional approach We've got to use as many tricks as we possibly can in order to get them there. And we really have to think a little bit outside the box, which I love that place. I love thinking out of the box. And really, I find it fun to kind of really dig deep and try to figure out, how can I get this kid to understand? How can I give them access? How can I, it's just, but you use several modalities that you wouldn't necessarily use with a typically developing kid. Then we need to adapt for individual strengths, needs, interest. We've got to adapt for all of those things, and really trying to pull the best out, because if they're interested in it, if it's something they like, guess what? They're going to be much more attentive than it is if we just give them things that we think are important. We've got to start by reaching in and getting their interest first. So how do we do that? And that's what we're going to spend next week, or a couple of weeks from now. That's what we're going to spend doing. We're really going to dig deep. I'm going to give you a lot of different, I'm going to give you a lot of different resources and materials, not only just what we're going to do that day, but things that hopefully outside that you can use. One of the things that I have given you is that it starts with their preference and interest. And with that, you really want to think about, what do they like? I like this particular form. It does likes and dislikes. And I really like this particular form because it goes beyond, because every time I go into a classroom and ask them, well, what do they like? Every teacher I know has said, oh, they like music. Well, what kind of music? Do they like rap music? Do they like classical, rock? Do they like that very fast, hard beat? Or do they like something slow and easy? What are the things like that? This looks at food, not only food, but taste and textures, and when you're starting to make those list of things, maybe you can start seeing, oh, he only likes crunchy things, or she only likes soft things. See, so we're looking at and trying to see if there are patterns in some of these things. Are there smells? Now, I'm not suggesting that you take a bunch of things and wave it under their nose, because that also could cause them to throw up on you pretty quickly, depending on how you do that. So, but if you notice that they kind of turn or are attentive when there's a smell, a particular smell, just like we all do when we smell something cooking and we get hungry. Oh, I like the smell of baked bread or cakes or different things. Touch. What kind of touch do they like? What kind of textures? Do they like hugs? Do they like some kind of fabric, something soft, or do they like things that are heavy or light? What kind of touch do they like? Do they prefer that I do a kind of a firm grip on them when I'm touching them, or would they rather have a light touch? Most kids want like a heavier touch, especially because that light can make you, want to hit somebody. Movement. Do they like to rock? Do they like to bounce, swing? What do they like in that area? What kind of vibrations? Do they like car rides? How they're bouncy and stuff. Are there particular toys that they like, or different appliances or different things like that? Sights, lights, colors, sounds, anything in that area. Sounds like voices or music, or is there a certain pitch that they like? Or do they like it loud, or do they like it soft? Are there environmental sounds? I've seen some pretty involved kids just get tickled, just laugh hysterically when they hear some particular sound in a classroom or whatever. Muscles. Do they like to push things? Do they like to pull things, bear weight? Are there particular people that they like? And even looking at those people, and do they have things in common? So you're kind of looking at this as a detective and really thinking through some of these things and asking different people, asking the family about these things, asking everybody that works with this kid, because kids are going to show us just like us. They're different people with different people. So depending on that relationship they have with that person, they may show you a lot of things or they may show you very little things. So that's why it's important to not just be you filling out this form, but asking others. As a sibling, I can tell you, yeah, my mom and dad would have known a lot, but I would have known a whole lot because I was on my little brother. I mean, I just felt like it was my mission in life I would go to school and be taught something, and he was in a wheelchair, and bless his heart, he was my captive audience. So I could tell you every single bit of what's on this page about him. So sometimes it's the siblings that you want to ask these things more so than even the parents, because parents are busy cooking supper and doing laundry and doing all those things to run the household. And they may not know all of these things or has paid as much attention to it. Same thing with us at school. We may or may not have known some of these things, but kind of watching and looking, it really makes a difference. Are there places they like to go? Are there certain activities they like to do? Are there certain toys? What is it about those toys that they like? Are they things that light up and somehow that gets their attention because of the light of the toy or whatever? Are there self-stim behaviors that they might do? And what does that tell you about? Are there any other things? Same thing with the dislikes. You're going to go with both of those things because this really is the foundation of where you can start going. Now, what we're going to do from this, I'm going to escape this because I'm going to stop sharing, and I want to take you to a website that I don't know if any of you have seen it. It's been around for a long time. It was the website that I helped develop. And it's really going to also give you some other things.
Hey, Nancy,
Yes, love.
I just noticed we have a couple of questions if you want to address those before you
I
get too
would
far.
love to. Yes.
So I've got, speaking of phonemic awareness, is there a reading curriculum you would suggest for hearing impaired students?
Oh, not right off the bat. I don't have one that I would think of. I always used reading milestones when they were young kids and starting, and that's still around. Yeah, that's all I got right now. I will think about that. How's that? Is there any particular age and stage? Where are we with that kid?
So she says that was the one she was thinking, and no communication.
Okay. I would start with what I'm talking about right now before I really get into a curriculum, because what you really need is to gain their attention and to get it. Even and when we're together, we're going to do a lot with experience books. And that's just one strategy, but we're going to spend some time developing and thinking about how to do experience books. I think you start there to gain their interest, then going into that curriculum, because we've got to connect them. We've got to get connected with them. And this is the way we do it. Okay, so the next question.
Okay, real quick, she says others have language but not reading well. And I'm gonna say that you can think about that and maybe talk about it at the next meeting.
Yep.
Okay. Then she wants to know, how do you connect word meaning if a kiddo doesn't have language or communication? And so I think we're going there.
We are going there, and we will also go there next when we're together. That's another thing that I will connect us with that. This is just your basic overview, and I'm also going to give you this resource today because I feel like you can use this as well. This has been around for a long time, almost, wow, 12 years now. But if you think about, this is all very much based on just good teaching is good teaching is good teaching, and it never goes out of style. And that's one of the reasons why this website is still up and running, is because it really is based on just good teaching strategies, and what should I do, how do I do that, where, where do I begin. And the whole reason why we even did this, we were working on outcomes and performance indicators for deafblind students around literacy. And so we did a lot of research, hit the research on significant disabilities, typically developing, you name it, everything that we could find and get a hold of. We were looking to see what is it about literacy and trying to make it make sense for kids with combined vision and hearing loss. So we then, as we were doing that, we also knew that the folks that we were doing it for may not have a heavy literacy background. So we put a lot of strategies in those. And our director said, well, that's all fine and good. Take those strategies out because we just need the outcomes and performance indicators. So those strategies sat on my desk for like 3 years. And I just kept saying, that's what teachers need. This is what they need. They don't need the outcomes and performance indicators. They really need to know, what do we do? So we finally got permission and were able to design this website. And we got to do it because it was just something that was needed to be done. So with that, we really framed it in a way, we wanted to make it down and dirty, because we know teachers don't have a lot of time. You don't have a whole lot of time to dig through and find things, right? So what we did was make it where, and the way that we framed it was, and you're going to laugh when I say this, I'm that teacher in Podunk, Utah. Why Podunk, Utah? I don't know, but it was Podunk, Utah. I'm in the middle of nowhere. I just found out that I'm going to have a deafblind child coming into my classroom tomorrow, and I'm supposed to teach literacy. What do I do? Where am I supposed to go with this? Because I don't have a clue. Help me here. So that's how we designed it. And what we did was we really married the National Reading Panel's components, those 5 components we talked about, with the stages of literacy development. And we tried to make it where it made sense. So if you'll notice on the left-hand side of the screen, this is kind of your tabs and where to go with all of this. So it starts with like building a foundation, then early emergent, expanding literacy is what we called instead of all the others. And then we also married in those components, so the vocabulary and comprehension and fluency. So when we did this, we also then thought, wow, how are people going to know where to go on this website? So we developed this literacy skills checklist. And it's right here on the front. And I would suggest that all of you take a look at this. We can make sure that y'all get a copy of this. And I will definitely make sure, Lisa, if you could put the website address in the chat for me, please, then we could do that. But what it does is it's a simple little checklist for you to say, do they use behavior as communication? Yes, no, sometimes don't know. Demonstrates behaviors that are difficult to interpret, cries for unknown reasons, demonstrates little or no interest in people around him or her. So it's asking you those kind of questions. Has little or no experience with rhythm activities or books or stories or writing materials or literacy learning activities. So see, it's asking you those things. So you're saying yes or no. If yes, then it tells you to go to building a foundation. Or if no, then you go on to the next section. And the next section just goes through more things that it would ask you, actively participates in turn taking or attends to a communication partner, those kind of things. If yes, then it tells you where to go. And if not, then it tells you, to keep going. So you keep going, and here's the next page, which is let someone know he or she wants to look at a book or be read to, different things like that. So you see how it's also looking at that kind of continuum piece. And it's your to answer yes, no. This is a good time to play that detective and start looking, start really thinking about and watching. Then the last piece is it just tells you what to do when you're doing this. Also looking at writing, vocabulary, comprehension, and fluency. So you always want to keep those in mind while you're still looking at those other stages. Now, I'm going to go back and let's pretend that we went into emergent literacy, that's where we wanted to go. All right, with that, this is all laid out the same exact way with every single piece of these. It has the typical stage is talked about in this first paragraph. What it looks like for our population is in the next paragraph, and just talks about that stage and stuff on the front of this thing. Over here are the different strategies that we've associated with that particular stage or that particular component when we were talking about writing or vocabulary or comprehension. So if we are looking at concepts, and we're going to talk quite a bit about concepts when we're together. So this is what to do. So this kind of is a task analyze. What do you do when you're thinking about concepts? So it's bulleted, just do this, do this, do this, do this, right? These are the different concepts that we want to talk about and target. And we'll talk about that again too when we're together. And if those things don't work, if this doesn't work, these are things that you consider. Wait a minute, because see, the ownership shouldn't be on the kid. Oh, well, the kid can't do it. It's more, we just haven't figured out how to do it yet. So it's the ownership goes back on us. If the things that you tried up at the top, those strategies and going through line by line and really task analyzing, if that doesn't work, maybe it's some of these things. Have you considered, are you presenting those materials in a consistent manner each time? Are you doing this, that, or the other? It's always bringing the ownership back on us, because guess what? It is our responsibility. Then there is this piece right here that's called always ask yourself. And do y'all see that? Lisa, do you see always ask yourself, or do I have to stop and share? Lisa?
We can see it.
Okay, that's what I needed to know. All right, perfect. If you will, under each one of those strategies is this form, and it's the same form every single bit. I would suggest to you that you take this out and you copy it and you stick it up on your wall and just have everybody thinking about these questions, because I guarantee you, if you think about these questions and kind of put it into practice, into your everyday practice, then you're automatically raising that bar on that kid. So the first one is, are you exposing children to literacy activities and experiences every day? If we're not giving them a chance and exposing them and giving them those opportunities and having them practice, just like they have reading groups every day in school. Well, if we aren't doing that with our students, they're not going to get it. Research shows that if we don't give kids need to have practice communicating. Are you ready for this? Every 15 minutes. Now let's look at our kids. Are they getting that? I'm going to tell you that that's not happening. And, it's not necessarily, I'm not saying, oh, you're a horrible teacher because you're not doing that. It's just because we get so caught up in so many other things that we forget that they've got to practice this stuff. We've got to make a concerted effort to do that. Are you using the child's most alert times to engage in activities? It's not necessarily our schedule. Some of our kids have a lot of involvement. So we got to find them in their best opportune times and make the most of it. Are they positioned in a manner that's functional and comfortable? Some of these kids, if they're like this and they're uncomfortable and we're trying to show them something, they're more focused on my body hurts. I need to move it. Or sometimes with vision loss, and if we don't know, we're putting things front and center, and they may have a vision loss that's in the center, in central vision loss. We may have to put it down to the bottom or up here at the top. It just depends on the student, and it's our responsibility to figure that out. That's where we tap into all our other team members and say, hey, I'm trying to do this. What are we doing? Are those environmental supports in place to facilitate their use of their vision or their hearing? So are we looking at the contrast, having a dark background on before we put the material down so that they can see it? Or are we looking at size? Sometimes the font size needs to be larger. Where are we putting it when we're presenting those materials? How far do we need to be, or how close up do we need to be? Those are all things that are game changers for our kids. And that can make or break our opportunities for giving them access. Have you identified yourself? So we get so caught up in our lives that we forget that, especially our kids with deaf blindness, we really need to let them know, hey, it's me, I'm here again. Or when I have to leave, hey, I'll be right back, because usually with our eyes, we see things. If you've got a kid that doesn't have vision, or they have low vision, then they're missing that. They're missing that the principal came to the door and said, I need to see you. We jump up, we run off and do it. And the kids left there going, what just happened? Wait a minute, where are we? So, those are the kind of things that are deal breakers for our kids. That feeds into that trusting relationship that we have to develop before we can do any of these things. Are you close enough to the child so that they know you're there? Sometimes too, that's stuff that we take for granted and we don't really think about. We got to think about their preferred methods of receiving information or their preferred methods of communicating expressively. And sometimes they're not the same. A lot of times they're not the same. So we have to think about how are we going to do that. I was in a classroom once where they wanted the student to learn sign language, but guess what? No one was signing. He could hear enough where everybody just talked to him, but they expected him to learn sign, but nobody was signing. So how is he supposed to know if it's not pumped in there receptively? He can't ever get it out expressively. And those are the things that are deal breakers. Once again, are all communication partners looking at their methods? Is everybody aware of these things? Are your cues using specific to and appropriate for the child? And and here's the thing that I've also seen is everybody doing the same cues? Because what happens is I expect him to do it this way, you expect him to do it another way. We all are asking for the same thing, but we have different expectations. And that happens all the time, people. That's why we really have to be careful and make sure that we get some way of capturing what they are doing. So then are you following that consistent prescribed routine during all literacy activities. So is there a method to our madness? We're going to develop that routine, and we're going to do that when we're together. So we're developing a routine of how we're going to do this, and we need to present it that way so that the child gets to know. Because one of the other things I've realized is, we do so many things rotely. We don't even think about it. That's how we can multitask. But our kids, I think so many things happen to them or at them, or we're pressed on them, that they are busy doing this and they haven't realized that there is a method to our madness. And when we get that routine going where they can anticipate what's going to happen next, then guess what? They're going to learn that routine. They're going to know how to do that routine, and they're going to follow it. We're going to use the same cues during it. We're going to be kind of consistent. Does that make sense, everybody? And then just, it goes on. There are several other things that are on there, but if you just think about these things, you're automatically raising the bar as you're thinking about going with and looking at different parts of teaching literacy to kids. Okay, so once again, there's also in here a planning section that's pretty involved. If you wanted to do some kind of literacy planning, we're obviously, we're going to do some things. We're going to do more around experience books. And really diving in and doing some deep diving around what is that? What does that look like? How can we do it? How can we get them involved in it? So I think that you're going to enjoy. We're going to do a little bit of hands-on where we're pulling out worksheets and thinking through and really problem solving. And so I want you coming thinking about a particular student in mind, because it's easier if you can grab it on with one student, then you can replicate it with other kids that you serve. Does that make sense? I'm hoping. Okay, so that is just this literacy website. It is on the National Center's website. You can find it there. I think hopefully Lisa's put it in the chat pod, or somebody has, and so that you have it up and ready, and you can access it. Y'all play around with it in this next couple of weeks if you can, and just do this literacy skills checklist on your student. Think about, wow, they're at this level. So what do I do when we're at this level? And play with that some. I know that you don't have a whole lot of time, and that's okay too. But just know that this resource is here and it's available for you and ready. Okay, so now,
Nancy, I did put it in the chat box, and I will add it to the email I send after the webinar.
perfect. And I will also send the literacy skills checklist too, so that if you don't get to explore this website, that's fine. But you could go on and do the literacy skills checklist. It's amazing to me. We developed it to go specifically with this website, but I can't tell you how many folks who have used the literacy skills checklist as just a starting place of, hey, this is where my kid is functioning. And it really does help kind of give you a roadmap a little bit. I'm all about giving those simple, down in the trenches, what can I do? How can I make this work and make sense? That's what I've spent a whole lot of my career kind of developing things like that, so that it makes it easier, because I was that teacher out there with no resources and going, what do I do with this kid? So I've kind of made it my mission since the National Center, and then as I've worked on my own, just to make some resources that will help you as you're out there trying to day in, day out work with kids. Okay, so with that, I'd like to stop sharing, and I'd love for you guys to kind of let's talk. because I really want I'd love for you to show your faces and actually let's have some conversation around this. You know, is any of this helping you so far just to get a foundation, or you pass this and need something else? Because that's really going to help me shape our time together. And don't everybody just share your, come on, don't
They're also shy.
get shy. I don't care if you're eating a sandwich. I don't care what you're doing.
Want our mics on also?
Sure, because I'd love for you to just talk about your, what are your things that keep you up at night, worried about how am I getting to this kid? What am I going to do?
I think one of the things for me is if you have a student that has no formal language, behavior is communication, but there's no way of connecting that to literacy. And I think we try the symbols, we try to include those in, and we try to, bathroom, we're doing sign, we're doing tactile, but he's not expressive of that and not sure what receptive he has either. And this kid is a complex kid. I mean, that's why we're here, right? But I want to know how to get that connection. And I know it's through experiences, but in a classroom with 4 other kids and 1 teacher, it's hard to gain those experiences when you're managing other behaviors too. Does that
Right.
make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That's where I think these experience books that we're going to talk about and do kind of that deep dive, I think that that's going to help. I'm going to bring an experience book that I made with my student. This was back in the 90s, kind of before internet and all that other good stuff. So we were making it up by the seat of our pants, folks. But the things that I will tell you is, first of all, you want to task analyze. What is it you want them to do? Thinking about that and really breaking down step by step. What is it that we're doing? And really looking at that and task. And I've got a tool for that too, friends, I just found, and it is delicious. Oh, I like your cat. So we will, I will show you that when we're together, because I think that's going to help you break things down, because sometimes we miss steps. We know things so much that we forget that it is step by step by step by step. And our kids, since they don't have those experiences, we kind of, start with, when we say a routine, we pile about 20 things in there. If I were to say, what is your morning routine? You would tell me from the time your feet hit the ground or your alarm went off until you get it to school is basically your morning routine. Well, in that are like 50 routines that you do. There's a routine to go to the bathroom. There's a routine to, get your coffee, take your shower, whatever it is. All of those different things. We've got to break those down for kids. We've got to break them down so that it makes sense to them and they see that there's a method to the madness of this world. Because otherwise, we're just kind of steering them, and they truly are doing this to us. And you cannot learn when you're in this mode.
So it's like taking a routine, like a first, second, third routine. And if bathroom is in there, you take that and break it down into pulling your pants
There is
down,
a whole routine to go into the bathroom.
right? Yep.
Okay, so now what we're going to do with that is we're going to take that and make it into an experience book.
So you take a diaper, you put that on there, you take toilet paper and you put that on there. Yeah.
See? Is that starting to make it like, okay, this is manageable?
Yeah.
Because you're breaking it down, because I truly, truly, with all of my heart, feel like we have not done a good job of making it so that it is so routine to these kids and breaking it down to that place where it becomes. Think about when you first started driving a car. Remember those days? I know it's hard, but we were all there and going, oh, and I've got to take my hand off the wheel to put the gear and brakes and and you know, we were driving 20 miles an hour and you're driving like a bat out of hell, right? Now, fast forward to now and think about your driving. How many multitasking things do we do? The only time, and I can't tell you how many times I've driven to different places and gone, how did I get here? Because we know driving so well, we don't have to think about it unless there's bad weather or there's a wreck or somehow our route is different, right? We haven't done a good job with kids in really breaking it down for them to a place where they know what's supposed to happen next. And it's your job to kind of break it down for them like that. But then it's almost they're leading and you're the rudder in that. You're steering them as they're learning this. You know, at first you're in front guiding them through it, but then you're going to look and you're going to task analyze it so that you can start checking off. They've got this piece. They've got this piece. This is the piece that they really have a hard time with. And we'll break that down even more. Does that help? Okay.
And can I comment here? I think maybe the piece that isn't real clear yet is that if you pick something like that and you make sure that routine is really clear to that child and really working for that child, and then we use that as their book, then they can make the connections, what this book is about and why it's relevant to them.
And I will share with you that I did do this with my student who was deafblind. And we had really task analyzed her morning routine. This was way back in the day, and my school system was unbelievable. She was a very, medically fragile child. And she had a Broviac deep line, which whatever that is, but she got her nutrients through that for 12 hours a night. She was hooked up to this apparatus that fed her, right? So she did not eat anything during the day. She only used that, and it had gone anyway. So my intervener, or it would be the Annie Sullivan to Helen Keller is an intervener, for those of you all that don't know what that is. But it's a highly trained, or supposed to be highly trained individual, paraprofessional usually, who works one-on-one with the child, right? So she would go every day to this kid's house, and they would go through, the mother would unhook her, and then they would go through a whole routine of getting her out of bed, taking her to the bathroom. She would then go through a bathing routine, dressing routine, getting everything all together, and then coming to school. And we made after we had done that systematically, just, every single day, for a couple of years, we decided to throw literacy into that piece, because at that time, Kentucky was doing everybody's a writer, everybody, and so we were looking at literacy and reading and writing, and how are we going to get that with Kentucky standards and yada yada, right? So we decided to make an experience book. Never heard of an experience book. What we did, and I will bring that with me when we come, but we broke it down and put tangible pieces of things so that she knew, when we did this, then we did this, then we did this, then we did this, right? When we did that, the power of that is amazing, because she would sit and she would read that book over and over and just cackle, because she knew, oh, wow, that's about me. That's what I do every day.
That's cool.
So when you get it and you break it down like that and really start thinking of, and an experience book can be about anything in this world. Anything. You can make an experience book about walking down the hall. You can make an experience book about going through the lunch line. You can, it doesn't matter what it's about, but you can break every single bit of that down and make it into some kind of tangible, tactile book, a representation that's going to help your kid to really understand. And I'm talking from a deaf-blind aspect, but it doesn't necessarily, depending on your kid, what they need. So yes, Robin, way to go. You've used them with life skills students. So tell the group, how did it work?
Yeah, they really interacted with it because they could see themselves. I
Exactly.
put pictures of them in there, and then sometimes we'd even put sound with them. So then they could turn the pages and do schedules that way too. But a lot of times we start at the beginning of the year with it just as kind of a get to know you kind of activity. And we'd add throughout the year different experiences too inside the book. And they really did enjoy that.
Right, because what kid, you tell me, and not just kids, we're the same way. Who doesn't like to have something that, hey, that's mine, that's about me?
Mm-hmm.
And when you make that connection, because a lot of times too, I think that they don't realize that we see that we're making that connection with them.
Yes. I think they feel it's a personal and also that they have a part in it. So they
Yes.
own it.
Right. And we want them owning it. We want them taking ownership. I would suggest, one of the things they say about experience books is, oh, you should have the child help you gather the materials and all this other good stuff. My suggestion to you is not while you're learning it, don't do it that way. And depending on the child, you may never do it that way. And depending on your circumstances, if the mama ain't happy, which is all of you, ain't nobody happy, right? So you have to make it make sense to you and to them. So, sometimes if I'm taking them on a nature walk, then yeah, I might get them to help gather. This is leaves. We got the leaves from the tree. Oh, here's some bark. Here's stuff off the playground, the surface stuff that's on the playground or whatever, wherever we are. Yes, Pathways to Literacy. And we're going to talk about Paths to Literacy. That's another resource I'm going to give you all when we're together that talks a whole lot about tactile representation and experience books and stuff. So we're really going to do a deep dive in exploring some resources, but we're also going to kind of roll our sleeves up and kind of start to develop a few ideas for ourselves, for our own kids, because I want you walking back and because you all are such a diverse group and ages and stages, and one person may need this and that, we couldn't do a make and take because it was just too much, too much difference in all of what you all need. But we're going to certainly start planning for those things, and hopefully we would share with each other after the fact and get back together so that we can have a show and tell of stuff y'all have made. And we can certainly see if Paths to Literacy won't put it on. I mean, they're always looking for examples and stuff. So,
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
How do we do these things with students that are tactily defensive?
That is,
That's what I'm running into with my multiple disability kiddos who are deaf or blind, one or the other or both, and just no matter what you try to, they'll either throw it or push away or pull their hand back,
and a lot of, do you do hand under hand?
Yes.
Okay, so you do hand under hand, which is also one of the things. And when you do hand under hand, and we'll talk, how many of y'all know hand under hand? Yes, no?
We've done hand over hand and hand under hand, both.
I would suggest that you do with your tactily defensive kids, I would do hand under. Because see, when you're doing under, and we'll talk about that when we're together also, for those of you who don't know it, we'll get there. But when you're doing hand underhand, then, and I hook, and I can't do it because I don't have another, but I hook their thumb on my thumb, with my thumb, so that they understand the importance of, I'm guiding you to something. And this is definitely with my kids that have vision loss or whatever. Some of my other kids, I would do hand under, because see, it's me who's going in there first. Sometimes it's like, what is that? I don't want to touch that. Think about those parties you'd go to in Halloween where they have they blindfold you and put your hands in stuff, and sometimes it's gooey and sticky. Well, they don't know what you're putting your hand there, So doing the hand underhand, I'm driving it, my hand's going in there first. I'm guiding them as to what that feels like and looks like. And then they can take their hands and kind of feel, once I've gained their trust. See, part of it is that gaining the trust. They've got to trust us that we're doing these things, right? And we take trust for granted with our kids. We just assume because we're teachers and we're at school, kids naturally trust us. But that's not necessarily so, especially our kids. If you look at our kids with NICU, they didn't start out the same way we did. They didn't start out, they didn't get that bonding. They didn't get all of those things. They got lots of bells and whistles and things going, alarms going off, and NICUs are noisy, crazy places. And, they're trying to keep them alive, but they aren't getting the sense of touch that we would naturally get and stuff. So therefore, they're going to be that way. And it's up to us to kind of teach them, it's okay. You're going to be all right, and we're going to model those things and show them. But I would definitely go more so with hand under than hand over, because it feels totally different when you force a kid's hand. Then that's your natural reaction, is to pull back. And I don't want that, right? But if you're hand under, you're guiding them more. And it really is more of a trust thing too, where they kind of start figuring out, well, she's not putting me in any, of the crazy cold spaghetti or those kind of things, right? So that does that help? I mean, we'll deconstruct all of these things when we're together. Anybody else? Questions, comments? Things you want to get out of this when our time together? Because I really do want, in another way, I'd love to see you guys become kind of a community of practice, or at least to know, hey, somebody in this state understands and feels me, and somebody I can call. Hey, Ms. Bryant has been around the block several times. I'm a new teacher, and I want to call her because she knows stuff. I want y'all to get to know each other and to be able to, because it's cold out there. Nobody understands your job, So many people don't understand what we do, and especially in your school system or whatever, it depends. But, it's nice to know that others are going through the same things you are, and to get ideas from each other. I feel like that's really important. I think the older I get, the more I really feel like that's an issue, and something that we need to, it's teaching is a hard job, folks. And it's, so we're all trying to figure it out. I'm still trying to figure it out. Yes, teamwork does make the dream work. But you also have to have that team that's trusting. One of the things that I realized over the years is what the child needs, the team needs. So if a child needs a communication system, then guess what? The team does too. The team needs to know how that works, everybody on that team. If the child needs that trusting relationship, guess what? So does the team, because it's hard for us as educators to go to somebody else and go, I don't know what I'm doing. Help me, right? We all are supposed to be, we're the professionals. We know everything. When we're going, I don't have a clue. I've never seen this. They never taught me this in school. Oh, yep, you're exactly right. The 2 students added with low vision and low English speaking ability. And that's another piece. When you come in, we've got a lot of kids that English is not their first language at home. And so we're teaching them English, and how do we get with the parents and figure out? So anyway, oh, that's beautiful. A personal sign dictionary for one of our students. I would say that for your kids that have no communication system or they have limited communication, I'm going to say that we do a communication dictionary for them that goes with them, because see, that stuff is not found in any IEP and all of that good stuff. But that's the stuff that's the deal breakers for our kids. Because see, you may have them for 3 years. And when they do this, you know what that means. When they do this, you know what that means. When they kick their leg or do blah, 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 whatever it is, you have figured that out and y'all have come up with it. But then they transition out of your classroom and go to the next place. What happens? All of that goes out the window because nobody has recorded it and let people know what it is. And think about if you have your kids come in and they've got that dictionary that somebody's just handed you. Yeah, it is very much like reinventing the wheel. And we do that, and then we wonder why our kids haven't progressed. And the reason they haven't progressed is because we haven't done our job the right way. And that's I'm not on here to get on a soapbox or say you're horrible people. We're all figuring it out.
And Nancy, I just want to add here, because this is a communication issue, but we all know literacy and communication go together. Not only do you need that dictionary that says this is what the student means, but you all need to have a dictionary that says this is what we're telling the student. Because even when you think you're doing the same thing, I had a team that I gave that assignment to. They made a dictionary and everybody knew this was the sign to stand up, or this was, except when I went to observe, 3 of them were doing it differently. They thought they were all doing the same thing, but they never looked at each other to see that it was just slightly different each time. And so they were asking that kid to learn 3 different languages, or, oh, hey, here she is. She does it this other way.
Right. And that's the thing that's happening with this population. And so that's what I'm spending the rest of my career, however that long is, talking about this stuff, because I feel like it's not that any of us are bad and it's nobody's fault. We only can do what we know to do. But once we recognize, then we need to do something about that. And this is the deal breakers for our kids. These are the reasons why they're not gaining, when they get to the end, because we've reinvented that wheel every time. And they, either shut down on us, or that's when you see a lot of behavior, So anyway, we are 3 minutes till closing. Anybody else have anything for the good of the cause? And I hope that y'all aren't going, oh my God, I've got to spend a whole day with this lady.
We'll have fun, I promise. And I'll feed you some good food.
There you go. We may even have some candy on tables.
You've made it very interesting, and I really appreciate that. You've been very animated, and I really like that.
Well, I'm a little bit passionate about this, in case y'all haven't realized that. This is my passion, and what I truly love is good instruction. It brings tears to my eyes to see good instruction going on and kids engaged and happy. And so I really hope that you all will gain things from this. Please, if you have any questions, concerns, whatever, or wow, could you talk about when we are together, shoot me an email. It's on the front of the PowerPoint. So if y'all have any questions, concerns, whatever, bring them. And you know, I may not have all the answers. I guarantee I don't. But I either know somebody who might know those, or the collective wisdom of this group, because each one of you guys have knowledge, and we need to start sharing with each other, you know? All right, my friends, with that, please fill out, Lisa, where's the evaluation?
Oh, you know what? We don't have time for that right now. I'll just send it in the email tomorrow morning. I forgot to put it in the chat box.
Oopsie.
Oops. But I
Okay.
will send it. So please fill it out and you will get a certificate for this first session immediately once you've completed all of that.
Okay, so we'll get 2 separate certificates then, Lisa?
Yes.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah, we want to give you as much credit as possible.
And the other part of that I did not say, and I think there were a couple people who aren't here. We did record today, so I will put the link to the recording in the email too, in case you wanted to look at it, or you know somebody who missed and wants to look at it before the day that we're all together.
Oh, and when we are together, please bring your laptops, because you are going to be exploring things and looking at different things. I want you all, you know, I want this to be interactive. I don't want to, I'm going to talk a little bit because, you know, that's who I am. But for the most part, I want you guys talking amongst yourselves, talking, you know, figuring it out, looking at different resources and trying to figure how to move forward with your individuals. Please think about 1, maybe 2 kids that you serve, because that's going to help anchor this information. It really, and then once you do, you can, hopefully you're already thinking about several kids that you serve and thinking, oh, that's this kid, that's that kid.
And Nancy, you sent them the likes and dislikes form. That would be good to have some info on that to bring with you about the kid you're thinking about.
Because we also might use some of that information to decide which is the first experience book I want to tackle.
So, but seriously, I know Nancy is really serious. If there are specifics about the kids that you're thinking about, that you're working with, and you have more questions or want her to come prepared to talk about a certain topic in this area, then send her an email. Send me an email and I'll make sure she gets it.
Yeah, either way, because I mean, I really want this to be something that you can take and run with after we're finished. Okay. All right, ladies, enjoy. Have a good evening. You all have been amazing, and thank you for all of my blundering and trying to get through. But we'll make it together. That's why we teach these kids, right?
All right. Good night, guys.
Take care.